Okay, welcome back to our lecture series, Digital Sustainability Transformation of, by, and for the TUM. My name is Stefan Wurster. I'm professor here for policy analysis, and together with Markus Siebert, I'm very happy to organize this virtual lecture series, focusing on these two central challenges of our time, digitalization and sustainability, and looking at the role of universities in this regard, and specifically the role of the TUM, the TU Munich, in regard to digitalization and promotion of sustainable digitalization and digital sustainability. And looking at the opportunities, the potentials, but also, of course, risk and problems of this big transformations. If you have followed this lecture series, you have seen that in our first two lectures we discussed these topics very broadly, and from now on we want to focus more on specific areas of this, especially sustainable development. And today we will start with the economic dimension of sustainable development. And we are very, very happy that Christian Felber is today with us, giving a talk and a discussion afterwards about the economy of common good and concepts for universities. I would say, we could not have found a better person to do so. Since our expert of today is really a pioneer and the initiator of the project Gemeinwohlökonomie. So he is really focusing on the question, how can economy promote common goods? And he published several books and articles and contributions regarding these issues. Just to give you some examples, for example, a book on trading for goods, in German, Ethischer Wertewandel. Then, of course, the central book regarding this Gemeinwohlökonomie, but also recently a book on This is not economy, in German, ein Aufruf zur Revolution der Wirtschaftswissenschaften. So you see, he's really an expert in this aspects. He published and thinks a lot about these issues, but he's also a political activist. He's, for example, co-founder of ATTAC in Austria. He is also contributed to the Austrian Movement Foundation that wanted to found a bank for common good. And he is the entrepreneur of the project Common Good Economy, and also inventor of the Common Good Balance. Since 2019, he is senior fellow at the IISS in Potsdam, and his book, The Gemeinwohlökonomie, is made it on the Spiegel bestseller list in 2021. With his ideas and approaches, Christian wants to promote ethical market economy that aims less at the profit of the individual, but more on the added values for common good. With regard to our question how to evaluate and make the TUM more sustainable, especially this common good balance he invented is maybe very, very interesting and important, since this is an idea or a concept that is suited not only for companies, but also for institutions. Hopefully we will learn also a little bit about this. Since this common good balance included different dimensions, we also mention in this lecture series, so economic, ecological, and social aspects with regard to common good orientation and sustainability. I think this might be a very interesting aspect also later for the discussion. Since this common good balance is also very successful, a lot of companies already adopted it, and as I learned recently, also since I'm coming from Baden-Württemberg, the state government in Baden-Württemberg, in the last coalition agreement, they also said they want to, they said that the state-owned companies in Baden-Württemberg should also use this balancing. So you see, this is really something not only theoretical, but it's really of practical importance. And so we are very happy to learn more about this. Today, Christian will talk about the economy of common goods and ecological model with future, with a particular regard also for digitalization. Before we step in, just one organizational information. As you may also know, after the talk, you will have the chance to ask questions so that we have a Q&A. There is a button F&A, and you can raise your questions there anonymously, or if you want, also with your clear name. And then we can include this here in a hopefully very fruitful discussion. So without any further ado, I will now hand over to Christian. Once again, thank you very much that you're here. We're really looking forward to your talk. And yeah, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Wurster. I'm very delighted and thankful to be invited to this class and to share some of my ideas and potential contributions to the great transformation that we are all in, and that I think no one is doubting any longer that it's necessary to become a more sustainable, a more responsible, a more cooperative and solidary civilization in general, and economy more specifically. I will introduce, as you already said, the idea, the model of the economy for the common good, which started 10 years ago in Austria, and which is working first and foremost with companies in the economy, but also banks, with municipalities, cities, and regions. Baden-Württemberg is one of 7 regional governments that have spoken out in favor of the economy for the common good. And we're working with educational institutions from basic schools who are teaching elements of the economy for the common good up to universities. There is a first chair, Economy for the Common Good, at the University of Valencia. And we organized the first scientific conference at the end of 2019 with 150 participants, economists and non-economists like myself. And your words, if the TUM were willing to do a common good balance sheet, that would be a really great result of this conversation. So thank you for the invitation, and I start to share my slides. Can you see the slides in full screen?
Perfect.
Great. So I start with a majority of the citizens, both in Germany and Austria, were already asking for a systemic change 10 years ago. So before the pandemic started, and even quite a while ago. And the majorities are impressing, because it was not a minority of the population that was asking for that big transformation, but a very large majority. And it was repeated because those who had conducted it were not sure if the result was reliable. That's why they repeated it in 2012, and the result was the same. The explanation is clear, because while mainstream standard economic figures keep rising, like income per capita or GDP, or the trade surplus of Germany, for instance, other aspects of life that matter maybe more for people, because they affect our health, our happiness, our relationships, and the quality of community, which is more important for people's good life and the common good, they worsen. And I don't want to go in detail here. Just one is really worthy to be mentioned, that even life expectancy started to shrink in the United States in 2015. And this is a really hard fact. And maybe the most worrying challenges that we are facing are the ecological ones. Climate change, of course, is the most known ecological crisis and challenge we are facing, but not the most dangerous one. The most dangerous one is biodiversity, the loss of biodiversity. And this has a direct, the reason is because if we lose specific species, no matter if plants or animals, this might have consequences that we cannot predict. So it's very important to protect and conserve biodiversity in order not to provoke reactions that we cannot control anymore. That's why I draw a parallel between the non-ability of economists to predict the financial crisis. This was because they hadn't included banks in their models. And they also did not predict the current pandemic, although they could have predicted it, because on the one hand, the pandemic is a consequence of our unsustainable way to run the economy. We are executing too much of pressure on the natural habitats of animals, in which live viruses that only jump over to other animals or humans directly if this pressure on their habitats is becoming too big. And that was the case now with COVID-19, but already before with AIDS, with Ebola, with SARS-1, or with MERS, just for instance. These are so-called zoonotic diseases, and we could consider them externalities of our way to run the economy. And as for the prediction, if economists had predicted the pandemic, which actually is not the first pandemic of that dramatic dimension, we all know the Spanish flu in 1920, which was by far more dangerous than COVID-19. But even less years ago, in 1986, the Hong Kong flu cost the life of between 1 million and 4 million people. These are the official figures of the World Health Organization. And so economists could have prepared us for a next pandemic, increasing hospital beds, for instance. But what did economists do? They recommended politicians to cut hospital beds. So this is another example how economics is not holistic enough and does not include the environment and social concerns sufficiently. And that's why many alternatives are spreading. And they say together tapas, which is not Spanish, but English. And it's an answer to TINA. TINA stands for there is no alternative. And tapas is the answer, stands for there are plenty of alternatives. And economy for the common good is one of these many alternatives. We are considered a holistic alternative, which means we are working in the real economy. We started with companies and banks and now municipalities and universities. But behind is a theory of change that is consistent and complete. It comprises 20 cornerstones. And it has it builds on historical roots and tradition, and it's an interdisciplinary approach. So I'm not an economist by formation, by training. I would have loved to study universal sciences, but I haven't found a university yet that offers universal sciences. Maybe I'm too late in history, or maybe too early, because there are now ideas to found a study of universal sciences. And last but not least, we have also thought about another way of taking political decisions directly by the citizens, a little bit similar to citizen assemblies that we have seen in Ireland and have now spilled over to Germany, France, and Austria. And that could be an enrichment of our existing democracies, not taking away any of the existing elements, but adding more elements for the democratic system in order to make democracy more effective and to overcome what Colin Crouch used to call post-democracy. My proposal has a name. Its name is sovereign democracy. And in let's say 15 minutes, I will tell you why. But I start with the model. And again, this could be and should be maybe the beginning of every economics textbook. Broaden the picture, take the full picture of the context of the economy, be as holistic as you can and include ecology, include ethics, include democracy and gender and power analysis, include virtually become universal science. And then you can answer the fundamental questions, such as what's the goal of economic activities? What are its broader contexts? And maybe what are its historical origins? These are fundamental questions that are rarely ever posed in the mainstream textbooks of economics today. As a consequence of this broader picture, we propose that the economy should be an instrument as a whole at the service of democratic societies, following the democratic rules decided by the citizens and their parliaments, and always respecting the ecological limits of the planet as for a start. So if we start with the ecological limits of the planet, that's the maximum we can use or consume. And only within these planetary boundaries, we unfold the so-called economic liberty. It's a completely different approach from today. And as a consequence of this bigger picture, our proposal is that economic activities should serve principally the common good, whereas money or capital are only considered as means. And this is not new at all. It had already been distinguished 2,300 years ago by Aristotle. He even coined two different terms for naming this difference. One was oikonomia, the term that gives name to economy and economics. And he defined this science of the moral rules of the household. Oikos is the household, and nomos are the moral rules with which we want to achieve a certain goal. And the goal of the economia is the well-being of all household members, or the common good, if you want so. And he was very clear about money and capital. They should only be considered as means to serve the goal. And we should never invert or mix up this relationship, because then the outcome would be the opposite of oikonomia, would be schematistique. Today we call it capitalism. And in capitalism, making money and increasing capital are the highest goals. And that's the difference from economy. And considering capitalism and economy as opposites, this is a lucid inheritance or legacy of Aristotle, which you will not find in hardly any textbook of economics. In nowadays constitutions, you will find a decision against capitalism and in favor of economy, which is the same as economy for the common good. In the Bavarian constitution, where you are in Munich, or many of you are in Munich, I fell in love with Article 151 only after publishing the book Economy for the Common Good. So I hadn't known it. I got a hint from someone living in Bavaria. Hey, look at our constitution. It's saying exactly what you wrote and published. And it couldn't be clearer. So I wouldn't consider that as dialectic. I would consider that as crystal clear. And my point is, if the Bavarian constitution justified and legitimated capitalism, then it would say the economic activity in its entirety serves the accumulation of capital. And in brackets, because we believe that if capital becomes more, we will be better off by all means. Close brackets. But it's not the case. Constitutions are very clear, and it's not only the Bavarian constitutions. All constitutions have that clarity. There is no single constitution that legitimates capitalism. All of them justify an original oikonomia, which is an economy for the common good. So we have a quite strong democratic and legal fundament for our proposal. What has to be changed? The main point is the way how we define the economy, and more precisely economic success. Because success is usually measured according to the achievement of the goal or goals of your endeavors company or project. You, of course, can also measure how much of means are available and at your disponibility, but that's of secondary importance. First and foremost, you measure success according to the goal. So if today we measure success in the economy with GDP on the national level, with the financial profit or the financial return of investment, then we are not measuring the achievement of the common good, although the economy is about the common good. Only capitalism is about increasing money and financial means. So this is a correct way and method to measure success in capitalism, but not in an economy. And that's the difference. In a true economy that serves the common good, we would have to measure success differently, maybe with a common good product, with a common good balance sheet, and a common good exam for every single investment. This is our proposal. This is the innovation our movement is contributing to economic thought. And how can we make it concrete? Well, the common good product could be composed by the citizens, because it would democratically legitimate the goals of economic policy and maybe also other policy fields. Our proposal is to gather citizens and invite them to propose what they understand by a good life quality, or the common good. And of all proposals, we will compose, let's say, a set of 20 sub-goals, from health to happiness to flourishing relationships, community, political participation, fundamental rights, stable ecosystems, or peace, just to name a few possible examples. And these 20 are operationalized and measured from year to year. And then we know if we really thrive or if just the money mountains are growing, which is not a reliable indicator on our thriving. Once we have a democratically composed common good product, we could just derive the common good balance sheet for companies, methodologically derive, and the common good assessment for investments, in order to first measure and evaluate if an investment is damaging any common good or any fundamental value. And only if it's not damaging anything, then we do also the financial risk assessment. And if both exams are passed, the investment can be done and can be financed. And companies, they have to report on what they contribute to the 20 sub-goals of the common good product. As we don't have it yet, we took the today best available democratic results, which are the fundamental values of our constitutions, which you see in the green line: human dignity, solidarity, justice, sustainability, and co-determination. These are the most frequent democratic values of constitutions. That's why we took them. These are not our favorite, private favorite values. They are from democratic constitutions, and we measure kind of how organizations such as companies, but also potentially universities, really live and implement these values according to all of their stakeholders, from the beginning of the supply chain to the 7th generation in the future. And in the fields of intersection, we defined 20 common good topics. And a youngster from Barcelona made a summary of the common good balance sheet, which I like most. She said, I understood that the common good balance sheet measures if a product makes sense in the meaning of satisfying basic needs of humans, what's its impact on the environment, the global climate, and the ecosystems, how humane are working conditions in the whole supply chain, how democratically are decisions taken, and who is getting the fruits of that endeavor, which part of the cake. I think that's the best summary. Of course, we could go deeper and it's not the first, let's call it sustainability report. There are many more, but what we insist on is that the result should be comparable and quantified. Because only then, if you can reduce the result of a common good sheet to one figure, in our case, it's a result between minus 3,600 points, that's possible, and plus 1,000 points, then you can compare directly the result with a common good balance sheet of another company, and as a consequence, and give it a color, for instance, or any other sign of distinction. That's our first proposal for digitalization. We are now implementing this project, but once in the future, you can scan with your mobile every product and can immediately not only see the overall score of the product, but any detail you're interested in about gender, about human rights, about climate, about tax justice, how many taxes this company pay, whatever you're interested in. That is one first application of digital tools in the economy for the common good. And now comes the more important point. Although consumers and investors would have more transparency, still the more responsible and climate-friendly products would be more expensive. Why? Because these companies do not externalize costs, they internalize costs because they externalize benefits. And externalizing costs makes their costs higher and their products more expensive, prices higher, and they suffer a competitive disadvantage in relation to dumpers, to other companies that do not respect our democratic fundamental values in the same way. They externalize costs, have lower costs, lower prices, and a competitive advantage. And this is counterproductive. And this is not an ethical market economy. This is an anti-ethical market economy. That's why we propose to link legal incentives to the result. So the sustainable companies pay less taxes, they pay higher taxes. They get a public contract, they don't get a public contract. They get cheaper finance, they get more expensive finance from the common good banks, and so on. They trade more freely, they trade less freely, and so on and so forth, until the most sustainable and responsible products are cheaper for consumers and investors than the less sustainable and responsible ones. That's the idea. The idea is to align the so-called laws of the markets, which are man-made laws, so they are not natural laws. That's the point here. That's why we can align the laws of the markets, because markets are socially constructed. We have to design, if we want it or not, we are designing markets, and we propose to design markets in that way that the laws of the markets, or let's say the forces of the market, align with social values and democratic values. And put in a picture, it would still be a market economy, because it would be markets, but not any longer capitalistic markets, but ethical markets. And we would shift from profit maximization and acting against one another to maximizing the common good, cooperating, at least being incentivized if we cooperate, because you cannot force anyone to cooperate, you just can incentivize. All right, and in another graph, it's not capitalism anymore, but it's not socialism either. And although some schools of economic thought wanted to make us believe that everybody who doesn't like capitalism is automatically a socialist, it was actually the Austrian School of Economics. That's simply not true, because there is freedom of thought, and we can imagine of an unlimited number of economic models. And we consider the economy for the common good as a true economy exactly between those two historical extremes, which were necessary to experience in order to know why we don't like them anymore, why they're extreme. So we are still a market economy, but not a capitalistic one. There is still private property, but with limits and conditions. And there is also collective action and collective property, but not exclusively. So it's not socialism either. And the whole model would comprise 20 cornerstones, including ethical world trade, sovereign money, common good banks and stock markets, many more design elements, but I just pick out one in order not to take too much of time for today, which builds on the planetary boundaries, on which Kate Raworth has built her donut idea. For those who don't know Kate Raworth and her donut economy, the inner limit is what 8 billion humans need to satisfy their basic needs, a minimum consumption of ecological resources. And the outer limit is what the planet is giving us on a yearly basis. So it's a great combination of social and ecological limits, which inspired me to the idea of human rights. So this is what the planet gives to mankind, to 8 billion people, without deteriorating planetary ecosystems. This amount of, let's call it, consumption of natural resources is divided by 8 billion and given to every human being. And we could tag every product and service sold on markets next to the financial price with an ecological price. And that ecological price is deducted from our ecological account, which we get every year on our bank account or next to our bank account. And this would be the second application of a digital tool that in, let's say, 10 or 15 years' time, all companies that want to access global markets have to give 2 price tags to the products. One is the financial price, which they already have to do, and the second one is the ecological price. The currency, of course, would be a physical one. Could be global hectares. That's the currency or the unit of ecological footprint, one of the most widely known and used measure of our ecological impact on the planet. And in my understanding, this idea is not only an ecologically rooted idea, but it's equally a liberal idea. That's I want to show with this graph, because voting rights are equally distributed. Every person has one voting right, no matter how much studies she or he had, no matter how smart, how clever, how intelligent, or how wise. All these criteria are less important than the highest criteria, which is human dignity. And human dignity means that every human has the same value. And this is why every human, no matter what, has the same voting right. And the same would apply to ecological human rights, no matter how rich, whatever, how smart we are. We get one ecological consumption unit. And this means that the poor, they have a competitive advantage because they don't even use it up and they could do something with it. Whereas the rich, they have to become very creative how to reduce their current overconsumption. And of course, there are more ideas connected to that, but I just wanted to introduce it as one further example how to make a common good economy more effective. And in this case, possibly thanks to digital tools and using digitalization for the right way. Maybe a fundamental comment on digitalization. I already mentioned that money and capital are considered as means in the economy for the common good, and exactly the same with technology more generally, or digitalization as one branch of technology. They are not ends in and of themselves. They are means. Radically, consequently, and only if digitalization or any other technology increases human dignity, increases the meaning of life and of work, increases ecological stability, increases social cohesion, and makes distribution more just, only then I would allow them. If they put at risk our guiding values, I would simply not allow them. Same with money, same with the company, same with international trade. International trade is not an end in and of itself, only if trade helps to fulfill more consequently human rights or to protect more effectively the global climate. Only then I would allow more trade. Otherwise, I would restrict trade and have not the least problem with restricting trade or not allowing a certain technology. All right, that on digitalization and the international movement. To relax a little bit, I will show you a couple of images. Today we have 3,000 supporters and 1,000 have done the Common Good balance sheet approximately. In all branches, farmers and bakers and outdoor producers and banks. This is not a Common Good bank yet, but it's on its way. And this one is a public company. You see, TUM is, as far as I know, 100% public. Is that right? So this is another public company of also Bavaria. It's a health insurer, and they got at the COP24 in Katowice, they got the Climate Protection Award because they succeeded in making their clients consume less meat. And this is good for the health of the clients, but it's even better for the health of the planet. And that's why they got this award. And of course, they're doing a Common Good balance sheet. And here is the poster for our first scientific conference. We have so far around 300 scientists from all over the world in our network. And they are teaching. There is also a first study, applied economy for the common good. So one idea would be a study or at least a class. Maybe the first step of applying the ECG in a university is offering a class on, let's say, business administration or sustainable management, in which the students do the Common Good balance sheet either for local companies in Munich and Bavaria, or for the very TUM. That would be a beautiful project that could be done by professors and students jointly in a class. Of course, a class could grow to a whole study. That's a possibility. And the study, of course, doesn't have to be limited to the economy for the common good. That's why I showed there are many of alternatives, and I already mentioned the donut economics approach to give one other example. The blue economy, the circular economy, social and solidarity economy, there are many more. And a study could investigate these alternative economic models. For instance, a chair could be established, or the TUM could do the Common Good balance sheet for itself. The first university which did it was the University of Barcelona, but it did not publish it. There was a threshold, which is that every 4 years, I think, the whole stuff is renewed in the Spanish university according to the Spanish university law. And that's why they could not make the full circle. But there are 3 universities of applied sciences which have published it. And the first one was at the University of Applied Sciences of the city of Bremen. And it's International Graduate Center. So there are some universities which you could ask, or which balance sheets you could at least look at to be inspired. Yeah, and of course there's a lot of discourse, and I was happy to contribute with a professor from Münster again, and a student of macroeconomics. And we published a piece which is called From Neoclassical Economics to Common Good Economics, and tried to lay the theoretical foundation for the economy of the common good. And there is now a growing number of articles and books. And so we're also participating in the discourse of transforming economic science in specifically. But as already indicated, we are considering economic science not a branch for itself. Rather, it only makes sense in conjunction with ecology, with ethics, with political science, with democracy theory, with gender studies, and more. This is our broader vision of the economy. Yes, and we are also applying it to municipalities. Maybe I go a little bit quicker here. I already mentioned the seven governments, and that the highest political backing came from the European Economic and Social Committee. It issued an own initiative opinion on the economy for the common good, which was approved by a majority of 86%, which is, okay, I don't have to comment it, which is a large majority, but they ask for including our model in the legal framework of the European Union and its member states. And and there we are, because this was in 2015. And although the European Union is talking about the Green Deal and is initiating a lot of legislative instruments, from the taxonomy to the non-financial reporting directive to corporate sustainable corporate governance project and due diligence, still we miss a really effective approach. And that's why this is the last part of my input. We also thought about a more effective democracy, and picking up Colin Crouch's concept of post-democracy, which I would rename in pre-democracy, because I don't think that the time for democracy is over. Although at the moment the democracy is on there is a backlash and a rollback of democracies, according to the Varieties of Democracy Institute at the University of Gothenburg. They just issued a very interesting report on the global state of art of democracies, and they're becoming less at the moment. But still, I see this as something transitory, and I think that there will be another hype for democracy with more participatory, more direct, or sovereign democracy. And I am also a political scientist. This is why I looked up what does sovereign originally mean. I did not learn that at my study in Vienna. And I was helped out by philologists, and they said sovereign comes from the Latin term superanus and means literally to stand above all. So the sovereign instance is the highest instance in any state form. It exists in a monarchy, there it's the king. It exists in democracy, there it's who? That's the question. But I think our constitutions are sufficiently clear. It's the people. And now what I did, I'm a dancer, and I really try to feel what would it really mean if the people stood above all, which would mean that they stood above the constitution and above the parliament and above the government and above an international agreement and above a single law. We would enjoy a long series of sovereign rights, which I call fundamental collective rights, or next to our fundamental individual rights. They exist, and they are one of our greatest achievements in history in the transition from authoritarian regimes to more democratic regimes. But we missed out to create collective fundamental rights. These would be the sovereign rights. And these are my answer to Colin Crouch. And I don't go deeper there. I just pick out one, which luckily already exists, kind of. And it's these citizen assemblies, which were kind of invented in Ireland. And the point is, if there's an issue which is very difficult for the parliament or the government to decide, we could engage citizens, but not in a referendum like Brexit, because this is an abuse of the citizen. It's an abuse of direct democracy, but really searching for a solution. And Ireland did it really brilliantly, I guess. That's why the role model spilled over to Germany and now also Austria and France. Of course, you should do it properly. That's very important. And most important point is that once a result is a proposal has been developed, it has to be submitted to the voting of the people. Only then it makes sense. Otherwise, you might frustrate people if there is an assembly or a convention and then the result disappears somewhere or nowhere. Then this could create a huge damage to democracy. But if the people really have the last say then and can really vote on, and not on the result, but on the results in plural. This is my point. We discovered a very effective method of decision-making developed by two mathematicians of the University of Graz. And I applied to this example. All over the world, people are asking for a lower degree of inequality. But they don't ask for eliminating inequality, because then everybody would earn the same, everybody would own the same. And in some people's worldview, everybody would be the same. I don't share this, but there are many people who think like this. And that's why people would prefer to reduce inequality rather to eliminate inequality. And we gave them an instrument which consists in two things. First, they can propose as many solutions as they want. One solution would be that highest incomes are limited with 5 times lowest incomes, or 10 times, or 100 times, or 1,000 times. And you can see on these charts, the proposals are on the left side, and all of them are voted upon, but not with affirmation, but with resistance. I could explain this more in detail. I now just explain it briefly. And the winner is that proposal that provokes the least resistance, that causes the least pain in the population, or that restricts the liberty of all citizens in the least possible degree. Actually, it's a method of minimization of freedom loss. But I could explain this more in detail. And you see in both cases, the winner is the proposal 10. 10 means that there would be inequality, but the highest incomes would be limited with 10 times the minimum wage. And this is the result of 500 games. I call them games. The game is called Democracy. Guess we had it. And if you compare the outcome, like 10 times, sometimes it's higher, sometimes it's 20 times, sometimes it's even lower, sometimes it's 5 or 7 times. But no matter if the outcome is 5 or 20 or 30 times, all these results are equally distant from the current state of the art in diverse countries. And I think this is my favorite example for showing or for proving post-democracy, because people would prefer a very reduced inequality, and parliaments and governments allow extreme, excessive inequality. And that's why we enrich our proposal for a more solidary and sustainable economy with a proposal of a more effective democracy, which we call sovereign democracy. Yes, that's it. I just would like to invite everybody in the end to join in whichever role, as a university professor, as a student, as a citizen, as a man, a woman, or just an inhabitant of this beautiful planet. Thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much for this inspiring talk. I will hand over now to Markus. So he collected the questions, and yeah, then we can just start with the questions. Maybe we start with the questions from the audience. Of course, we also have a lot of questions, but maybe we start with the audience. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you also from my side. We have already some questions from the audience. I want to invite all you out there to hand in more questions through the Q&A tool. maybe we start with the first one. You mentioned approaches on the local level and also on the regional level of the economy for the common good. A question from the audience was, are there any national and global attempts, approaches? Maybe then also then the second part of the question, what are hurdles, barriers for implementing it that you want to stress and highlight?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, let's start top down in this case. We had first activities in our engagement on the global level, concretely several invitations on behalf of the United Nations, United Nations Development Program and Environmental Program. And we introduced the idea of ecological human rights at that scale. Now I'm writing a policy brief for one of the biggest international environmental groups on an ethical world trade, which would be same as I put economy between capitalism and communism. I place ethical world trade between protectionism and free trade, which is opening borders to the maximum and closing borders to the maximum. So these are activities on a global scale. We have now a policy team in Brussels to influence the European Union. And we were following very closely the revision of the European Union's directive on non-financial reporting. This is the directive which is regulating the reporting duties of companies next to the existing reporting duties on financial information. There is now upcoming another reporting duty, and they call it non-financial reporting, but actually it's about human rights and labor rights and distribution and gender issues and democracy, like lobbying or tax avoidance. It's actually everything that's interesting and relevant. It's about ethics, and we would like to create equal legal standards for financial and non-financial reporting. And we're trying hard since many years, but even the revised directive will be very, very soft and flawed again, because industry lobbyists, they are asking the policymakers to keep it to a very limited circle. Actually, it will affect, instead of 0.05 of all companies, so half of a per mil of all companies, it will now affect 0.2% of all companies in the region, which is 2 per mil now. This is the progress. And so you have an idea. And as we were not really listened at the level of the European Commission, we're now trying to influence policymakers on the national level in Austria and Germany, in Spain, and in other countries, to at least try. No? And at the same time, we try to have one day a European citizen initiative that jumping over the threshold of 1 million signatures in at least 7 countries does not lead to a judgment from the European Commission. I like it, I don't like it, but leads to a binding referendum on the European scale. That's another endeavor which we are heading forward together with More Democracy in Germany. And last point, there's a first proposal in the German Parliament, in the Bundestag, on doing a common goal balance sheet for 2 public companies, and on the national level, and one of the 2 should be the Deutsche Bahn, German Railway Association. That's now in the Parliament, but there hasn't been taken a decision on that proposal yet.
Yeah, I would be happy to have a vote on the well-being of on my train rides. That would be awesome. Another question from the audience came in that touches upon your argument about kind of like the dominant discourse at the universities of neoclassical economic. And the question is kind of like that, most of the courses that are taught are oriented towards the idea of growth in economics, but also in other fields of studies. So the question is, where do you see the biggest barriers for teachers at universities to talk about alternative topics, such as the ESG or circular economy or other approaches. What is your advice for a better strategy to enter these conversations, to implement them, bring them into discussion?
Mm-hmm. So the question is, what are the hindrances for university teachers? Okay. Well, I would answer that on the one hand, you have freedom to a certain extent. And on the other hand, you don't have that freedom, because specific journals will more likely accept your articles and contributions if they align with a specific worldview and mindset, or would even blatantly reject your contributions if they do not align. So maybe one of the proposals, which is also made by the reform movement within economic science in Germany, the Gesellschaft für plurale Ökonomie, or on the international level, it's called Rethinking Economics in English. It's Post-Autist Economy in French, and there is an international student movement for more pluralism in economics. That's the most general term, and they ask that the tenders for professors should not be linked to these journals. So they should, on the other hand, should be linked to a plurality of publications. That would be maybe one of the most important reforms, because then you don't depend on publishing in these mainstream journals. And on the contrary, you only can become a professor if you show that you understand more than just neoclassics. It's a single point of intervention, but maybe it's a acupuncture point.
Thank you. Another question from the audience is, one could criticize from a neoclassical perspective that focusing on so many different goals that you propose, on so many dimensions, that it slows down the progress on each of them. So what would your answer be on that type of critique?
Yeah, twofold. On the one hand, we see our holistic approach as a virtue and not as a vice. And we offer many people, thousands of activists. At the moment, we are 5,000 in 33 countries, to engage wherever they are drawn to. And some want to work with companies, others with banks, others with cities, others with universities, or they create a chair. Those who created the university chair would never volunteer to work with banks, for instance. They teach and they train and they publish, and that's their business. So this is one, and the second is we will of course start campaigns one day, and one day when this is the most important limitation. Also, in my answer on the first question, we would love to have 10 people in Brussels, and we would love to have 5 advisors of the United Nations, but this would require resources which we don't have at this point of time. But we are looking forward to enjoy more resources in the future, and then we will have the ability not only to place some people in Brussels, but also to start campaigns. And then we will agree on a focus, and then everybody next to doing whatever she or he is doing will pull on the same rope. And for instance, it could be that companies in Germany will be obliged to do a common goal balance sheet next to their financial balance sheet. That could be one campaign. But my favorite, I already talked about my favorite, is the composition of a common goal product. And this is so likely to be welcomed by the citizens, because there was a survey. It was an opinion poll of the government. It was the Ministry of Environment together with the Umweltbundesamt, so the agency for the protection of the environment, and they asked if people would like to continue with GDP if it involves further environmental destruction, or if they prefer to shift to something like common good product or a gross national happiness or something alike that includes social and ecological values. And in this representative survey, only 18% of the citizens, 1/8, voted in favor of continuing with the GDP as the highest goal of economic policy. That was part of the question, as the highest goal of economic policy, whereas 67%, which is a majority of 2/3, voted in favor of shifting from GDP to a gross national happiness or a kind of a common good product.
Maybe I can insert a question there from my own, because kind of like it links into what you said immediately. Kind of like, how do you define the common good? So I think, you know, I mean, you don't have to be a believer in there's no such thing as society or something like that, yeah. But even from a pluralistic worldview, yeah, how do you aggregate what people want? So, you know, like beyond, of course, we can agree well-being, yeah. But yes, well-being means different things to different people. So maybe you can elaborate a little bit on how do you define in the end what the common good is?
Yeah, with pleasure, because this is exactly what I was starting to talk about now. From a philosophical point of view, you have two different possibilities to define the common good. One is a natural definition, and one is a formal definition. The natural definition would be that some external instance, the dictator or God or an emperor knows what the common good is and defines it. And we reject it 100%. And the formal definition is it has to be defined by the people affected by the definition, so by all citizens. And so there is no predefinition of the common good. Brackets, same with justice. There is no predefinition of justice. There is John Rawls, and there were others, but in the end, there is no objective definition what just means. Not even free. There are 150 different notions of freedom, and we have to decide. We can distinguish positive freedom from negative freedom, and quantitative freedom from qualitative freedom, and this definition of freedom and this other view of freedom. But in the end, it has to be decided by the people. If going at 150 miles per hour through the city is allowed or not, it's a restriction of liberty. But in order to gain other liberties and other rights for others, what I mean, no problem at all that there is no common view on what the common good is or what well-being is. Actually, if you take a closer look, you will have in the end as many opinions as people, because everybody of us is unique. So slightly we will differentiate from one another. That's not the problem. That's even a grace, because it proves that we are unique. Problem would be that we were not able to sort out, let's say, the 20 most strongly supported components of the common good product. And maybe 200 proposals will be done. And one, of course, will propose everybody should have an SUV. And one, of course, will be, I want to collect guitars, and public money should be spent on guitar fabrication. But this will be only one and then only another one. No problem, because what will be distilled in the end, this has been investigated in very diverse places of the world, in very diverse cultures. Just one of them is Manfred Max Neef in the rural areas in Chile, and he distilled the fundamental needs of humans, and these are equal all over the world because we belong to the same species, and what remain, and fundamental values first and foremost have the function to protect the satisfaction of the basic needs of humans. And this is why the probability that the results of a democratically composed common product in Chile and in China and in Bavaria will be very, very similar, if not the same. it will be about health, about happiness, about relations, about family, about community, about democracy, about ecology and peace. And that's it. No? So the result will have the highest possible democratic legitimation. And in case in a different place, people would compose their common good product differently, would not be a problem at all, because it would be just expression of cultural diversity. Cultural diversity is nothing bad, and just the worst possible cases that we could not trade freely with another country. And I'm now becoming a little bit provocative. If the Chinese really decided that human dignity does not count and human rights can be violated with forced labor and with child labor and with torture, whatever, then I would just not trade freely with China, because then products that include the violation of human rights would access our markets, and this is against our values. So the worst possible consequence that another culture really had different values than ours, we would just not trade freely with that culture, and that's it. But that was provocative, just in order to enlighten what's the game behind now. If you ask the people, what we know from science, from psychology, from anthropology, from intercultural comparisons, we know that people would agree in China and in Chile and in Bavaria that they want to be free and they prefer democracy. And I guess that even men and women should be considered as equal, would be the result if you ask the people, not if you ask governments. Maybe here's one of the very few remaining possible differences, but I would even predict that it's just a matter of time when this difference will be equalized.
Thank you very much. Another question with regard to a relationship to a different concept. So the one question is why the economy of the common good does not include the idea of degrowth yet. So
okay, we absolutely do. The common good product can only rise if the absolute consumption of biological resources shrinks. If it degrows, only then the common good. But maybe what we don't have it in a title. We don't title our proposal, it's a degrowth economy or post-growth. We title a common good, and element of the common good is, I showed it in my slides, that people in Germany and in Austria will have to come from 8 or 9 or 10 global hectares to 1.7 global hectares. That's degrowth in a very harsh way. Yeah, and but if you define the goal as ecological stability and resilience, then this can grow, because growing ecological stability and resilience means that we have a degrowth in resource consumption in absolute terms. And maybe, yeah, I think it's answered.
Mm-hmm. Maybe then, because it directly links into this question again, also, how would you propose to offset the costs of consumers or companies that are not engaging in externalizing their effects?
They would score lower. They would score even 100 points or 50 points, or even and they would even have a negative score, because I already showed that the negative score could reach down to minus 3,600 points. Why that? Because we don't want to offer companies the opportunity to compensate for their worst crimes, to say like this, but violating or profiting from the violation of human rights is a crime, so it's not polemic. Or avoiding taxes, that's legal, so it's not a crime. But from the meaning of tax justice, it's kind of a crime. and we would like not to offer companies to compensate for the worst crimes with scoring very high in other fields. So if you commit a severe crime, then you get so many negative points that you will never be able to compensate that. And the idea is going deeper. So if you don't do a common good balance sheet, you cannot continue to operate. That's the same with the financial balance sheet. But if you score negative in three following terms, then policymakers could decide to speak out the ethical insolvency of a company, which is still willing to continue. But the same with some companies that are financially insolvent. It's the judge who speaks out. You are insolvent. You're not allowed to operate, to continue to operate. So that's the state of law too, because we talked about the state of law previously when we analyzed who actually creates markets, but that's a different story.
And what would your favorite positive instruments be, to encourage different behavior?
Sorry, that was just I didn't tell the whole story. We would start with municipalities, economic promotion. There are so many instruments of economic promotion. It's startup, incubators, hubs, it's direct subsidies, it's real estates, it's many diverse instruments, cooperation with universities, for instance, that are fostered by the city. Then public procurement. Public procurement is 15% of GDP in Germany. So it's a huge leverage. In some countries, it's even higher, from the local to the global level. Then finance. We know already banks that, and one concrete example is the city of Münster. Münster has not only decided that all public companies will do a common good balance sheet, but that the city will also use the balance sheet and the values of the ECG in its public procurement and economic promotion decisions. Finance, there is a first bank in Austria which is offering a common good account. But the point is, a first bank in Switzerland has offered a company that has done a common good balance sheet to a reduced interest rate for being that sustainable. That has happened. And as for the taxes, it has happened that the city of Oregon in Portland is taxing companies in which inequality is exceeding 100 times between the highest and the lowest, with an additional corporate profit tax of 10%. And if inequality is growing towards excessive 250 times, then the additional corporate profit tax is 25%. So that's in the United States. This is applied economy for the common good. And next step would be full access to global markets only for high scorers. And the lower or the poorer the score, the more expensive the access to global markets, the unfreer they trade, in order not to foster dumping, but to foster caretaking.
Thank you. There's a super interesting question also from the audience. How can the concept of the common good be transferred or implemented in our everyday lives without becoming an activist, but kind of implementing it directly?
Yeah. Well, we are a little bit more holistic than I told you so far. There is, for instance, a tool for introspection. And you can reflect on your personal values without talking to anyone. We call it self-test, and you can just download and use it and not tell anyone. But you can ask yourself, what do I understand by human dignity? And what do I understand by justice or by sustainability? And of course, in the end, by the common good. And what's my contribution today to strengthen this value? And to hold up this value in this society. That's the first step. The second step is to reflect on every market activity that you are doing, which means every purchase or sale, and then go enlarge and do the same on every economic activity. And this is the most trickiest exercise, because what the hell is the economy? And of course, after years and years and years, we did not only discover that economics is very weak in defining what the economy actually is, because of course you could say it's only transactions on markets that are paid in monetary units. That's one possibility. But then you would start to ask questions: why is only that economy, and why is breastfeeding not part of economy, and why is growing my own vegetables not economy, and why is helping somebody, saving someone's life not economy? So what's the definition of economy? And our definition is just one further offer, is all activities that satisfy basic human needs. That's the economy. No matter if markets are included or not, no matter if financial transactions are included or not, no matter if public goods or commons are included or not, it's about satisfying basic human needs. That's the art of economy. And then it becomes very, very diverse, and you become an economist by all means. And you could reflect, how am I practicing the economy on markets, in my household, in my neighborhood, with others, in voluntary networks, in a public good, and elsewhere. And that's an extremely important and relevant contribution of every single person, without having become even a member of the Bavarian Association for the Promotion of the Economy for the Common Good. That's the next step.
I have 3 more questions, and then I close the list. And I think like at least 2 longer ones and 1 short question that you can answer shortly, maybe. So one question would be, it relates to what you already mentioned in your last answer, whether private households should be scored as well, or only companies or states. Or
private persons, they are scored in China. The social credit system. This is not our business. We are a liberal movement. We would never score privates. That's for authoritarian regimes. We score legal persons, because we want them to take responsibility and to take care of our future, and because they have no dignity and they don't enjoy human rights. And that's good, because if they did, human rights of natural persons would be at risk. And that's what we want to avoid. Protecting human rights and not evaluating persons.
That was a clear-cut answer. And the second question then was, how do you deal with kind of like irrationality of people, in a sense of that they might not know what they want, or even vote against their best interest? How does it fit into your concept?
We dance with it. Why would it be a problem? they have, in the economy, they have the freedom to buy the dumping product. They just will have to buy to pay more for it.
And then the last question.
And allow me, it's the same argument that's brought today, because today the argument from neoclassical economists: what's your problem? People are allowed to buy the ecological products. Yes, but they just have to pay a higher price. Let's do it the other way around. Let's allow them to buy the less ecological product, but let's make them pay more. I think that's the more intelligent market design than the one that we have today. But it's the same degree of liberty as today. Sorry for that. PS.
Then, we have the last question. I really like this question also a lot. If I have only time to read one of your books, which one should I read? You can also name 2 or 3, the question said. But
the model of you want to get to know an alternative economic model, read The Economy for the Common Good. If you are interested in the ethics behind, read Neue Werte für die Wirtschaft. It's in German only. if you want to read a much broader approach with taxes and financial markets and trade and more than read 50 proposals for 50 Vorschläge für eine gerechtere Welt, which is also only in German. And if you're interested in deconstructing economic science, you can read my latest book, which is This is Not Economy, Aufruf zur Revolution der Wirtschaftswissenschaft. At the moment in German and Italian, but in 2022 also in English. And I would have a last proposal for you, if that's the right moment now.
Of course.
Because you yourself, Markus, and also Stefan, you post a whole series of questions and what's the common good and how do we know what's the common good and who defines the common good, and isn't it such a tricky and oily concept? And I did my best to answer that question, and I would even like to turn back the proposal. One of the most beautiful projects I can imagine is that a highly renowned university as the TUM starts such a project with the city of Munich, or at the university, or in Bavaria, or in cooperation with other universities in 3 to 5 regions in different parts of the world. I don't know, but actually this would and that would inspire me and make me even more enthusiastic than doing the common good balance sheet for the TUM, which would also be great, but initiating on behalf of the institution of the TUM, such a citizen assembly, creating a common good product out of 150 proposals or more, that would really, really make me happy if I'm allowed to leave this as a desire.
Thank you for this advice. Yeah, to think about this and to discuss it. Maybe you give to me a very convincing answer to that, or it's not clear, of course, what is the common good, or it must be a democratic decision. However, maybe we have some basics that are maybe because the basic condition, of course, of this process is that this process is fair and free, yes, and all can participate. And this would be also, maybe I'm not turning once again back because I have a lot of questions, but I will focus only on 2. And one is exactly focused on this, because you now mentioned this idea of the Bürgerräte, and you are very, saying this is maybe the answer. I did a lot of studies regarding direct democracy and regarding, for example, sustainable development. And one of the key results is that direct democracy is not always the best way to promote sustainable development, because there are a lot of problems with this, especially because there are biases in decision-making processes. Some groups have more resources, more time, more money, more influence whatsoever to influence. And my question is, how would you guarantee that in a Bürgerrat whatsoever, even so there at the beginning, there is a decision that certain groups are represented, or so that these decisions at the end are not biased. I think that's a critical question here. And a second, maybe also linked to this, or to this idea of the university promoting public good, or we are here focusing on this project. We are saying, okay, we are looking at the sustainability of a university. You already mentioned an example that there is a university. They did this common good balance. It's the University of Valencia. So maybe you can tell a little bit about the results, and maybe also what have been the biggest challenges there. What can we learn from this example? Yeah, so to be concrete, the result of the balance sheets, but also more than this, what can we learn from this first examples?
All right. With which question should I start? Maybe the second one is a smaller one, or or do you prefer that I start with your first question?
whatever.
Yeah, maybe I start with, yeah, let's see. No, I do the same order of questions. There are 4 to 5 aspects that I would take into consideration in order to get the best possible outcome of a citizen assembly. But it's a lot about procedure. I fully agree. You can make many things wrong, and you can then make good as well. First is a random selection of citizens. So that we thought of 4 different ways to constitute an assembly, but it has turned out to be the best one, the random selection. But of course, according to age, income situation, migration background, gender, and maybe other region, of course. At least these 5 criteria should be representatively fulfilled. And yeah, I would include 50% women. That's a must. First. Second, liquid democracy. So the citizens which are not in can make proposals, which expert should also be listened to, or which proposal should also be considered. This is the third. Diverse experts have to be listened to. Fourth, the assembly does not decide. That the assembly prepares the options which are voted upon by the citizens. That's 4. And fifth is the systemic consensus principle. I think this is the most effective prevention against corruption from a powerful industry or lobby group, because if you have 5 proposals and measure resistance, anyone who tries to influence publicly the outcome of that votation will automatically provoke resistance against this proposal he is campaigning for. That's for sure. So and now I can explain this a little bit more sensitively. It doesn't make any sense at all that a pressure group or one stakeholder in the society makes a proposal that is tailor-made for them, because it doesn't make sense for anyone else, and it will provoke automatically very high resistance. So it only makes sense that you make a proposal which includes everybody else as well. And only then, if you include everybody else better than everyone else who is making another proposal, only then you have the chance to win. So all the polarizers and the campaigners, they have not the least chance. Actually, you only have a chance if you are very attentive, sensitive, empathetic, and actually the most empathetic proposal will win. That's the beauty of that process. Once you have experienced it, you understand it, and it's completely different than the logic of the simple principle of majority. So taking together these 5, I think this is the best prevention mechanism against any powerful lobbyists or influencers. And your second question, yeah, I haven't accompanied any of these universities of applied sciences, but I know that the first difficulty for them was to rename clients in students. Because one of our stakeholders, we have suppliers, employees, clients, and then other companies and the society, general society, and they renamed clients and students. But I think that was feasible. We overcame this challenge. And then it started very simply that with the procurement policy. And the challenges were that the administrative chancellor of the university, there are sometimes 2 chancellors. One is the administrative chancellor, one is the scientific chancellor, and so this is a challenge. They have to agree. And then the administrative chancellor has to provide data. he has to become naked, and that's the challenge. Transparency is not always welcome by everyone. So actually, you have to first talk to those who provide the data. Where do we buy things and why, and what's the criteria? I think here we start. So this is one challenge. Maybe you first talk to those people. And then, of course, the trickiest things are, I think, democratic participation. Do students really have a say in the decisions? Of course, I know there is the Universitätsmitbestimmungsgesetz or something alike in Germany, and a similar one in Austria. So there is some of the co-determination of some of the stakeholders even institutionalized in the law. But this is just one formal reference. And then there is much room of maneuver above and below. And this is then what it is about. And then, of course, who is financing the university and according to which criteria? And this is maybe the last very tricky point, because you know that according to austerity policies, universities are more and more dependent from third-party funding. And third-party funding is not always acquired according to ethical criteria. So maybe that is the last very critical point that occurs to me answering your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, because that's of course we started here this lecture to look at the digitalization and sustainability of the university, and one aim. Or the TUM is also from other persons also, they want to start to evaluate. We are focusing here on this issue of sustainable development, but of course this is very, very much linked to this concept of common goods. And of course there are a lot of problems on this way. And I think thank you for this first hints and ideas regarding this. Thank you.
In a follow-up email, I offered to provide you with some contacts of other. Now, as we are talking, I remember that the Technische Hochschule Nürnberg is not only doing the balance sheet, but they also offer the contact person in order to exchange with experts from other university who are also willing to do it. So I will update you on the latest state of affairs and provide you with some more information and contacts if you ask me to do it.
Yeah. Perfect.
Great.
Yeah. Thank you, Christian, for your time and even staying on for a little bit longer now. So this was really an inspiring talk. Thank you very much. I take a lot out of this. I think we will have some chances also to follow up on many issues. This was, again, thank you very much for your time, your enthusiasm, your knowledge. We were really glad to have you with us today.
Glad to hear that, and it was a pleasure. And see you in a different occasion.
And to the audience out there, thank you very much for your time as well. Next week we have the next lecture on corporate digital responsibility. Looking forward to seeing you there again. And thank you and have a good evening. Bye.